Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the State of the Mets here at the Queens Baseball Convention. It's going to be a tough State of the Mets. Obviously, there's a lot we have to discuss, but I want to introduce our panelists, and then I'll give a short State of the Mets, and then we'll get right to it. We're also going to offer anyone in the crowd, once we get done with panelists, if you guys have questions, and if you have questions for anyone in specific, just when you get the microphone, just say this question is for, Lori, question for Anthony, question for Matt. Again, my name is Mark C. Healey. And for those of you who follow me on Twitter, I am back after 2 weeks of getting hacked. I apologize to anyone who got a scam email, scam DM, but that's the only thing I'm happy about today. But let me just introduce the panel. Here we have Lori Rubinson from WFAN, does a fantastic job. We have Matt Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part, a great podcast that he does with our host, John Santanaro. We also have Anthony Rivera from Subway to Shea podcast, and also does a tremendous job. So, I'm reminded of the words of the late, great Jimmy Carter when he spoke to the nation about we have a crisis of confidence. And that's, I think, how a lot of us are feeling about what has transpired over these last couple of weeks. Obviously, we all feel very deeply and very, it's almost cathartic right now for us to all be together today to share that. I've been on Spaces on X all week trying to be the voice of reason. It's not working. So I'm really hoping that these excellent panelists that we have on board today will be able to give us some clarity and possibly some hope for the future. Laura, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, the loss of Pete Alonso is something that we almost had last year. We here at the Queens Baseball Convention, I even said, we're going to get Juan Soto, but I think we might lose Pete Alonso. People were not happy about it. So when you saw that Pete signed Baltimore, what was your feeling, and what was the feeling of the people that were calling the show?
So, big picture, I'll give you a feeling for all three of the Mets, kind of out of that core that were lost, but I'll run into detail on Pete. When I saw that, my emotion for the Mets losing Pete Alonso was sad. My emotion for the Mets losing Edwin Diaz was annoyed. And my emotion for them losing Brandon Nimmo, I don't want to say the word is happy, because I love Nimmo and I've loved watching him play, and there have been years where watching him sprint the first base after a walk was maybe the highlight of a Mets game. But I understood their strategic rationale, which is why David Stearns is in place. And I got that. And if they had replaced Nimmo with which they still could do, with like a Bellinger, Cody Bellinger, or something like that, I'm like, all right, this team, I could see where it improves the pitching. They can be better a year from now with, this upcoming season. With Pete Alonso, I think if you lose Nimmo, losing Nimmo and Pete, first of all, now you've got two holes in the lineup, and the Mets need two impact bats, and maybe David Stearns can go find those. But I also think it is if you didn't already know it as a Mets fan, it is a very clear reminder that David Stearns, who I mostly really like and admire, is going to look at things like an actuarial table. This is going to be about first basemen who are 30 plus, aged a certain way according to history and the curve. And anything that's emotional, that fans, that attachment, that's not really going to factor into the calculus very much. And I believe the strategic part of it is really important, and you get better decision making that way. I get it. But I also think that in Pete's case, there are outliers, as you're saying. In Pete's case, number one, he's not just every right-handed 30-plus first baseman with power. He is somebody who plays 162 games. He is somebody, when you see him stretch for a ball, the flexibility there, I think that bodes well for a body type that will age well and will continue to play 150 games through his mid-30s and make that contract therefore deliver, ROI. So I'm sad that the Mets are losing Pete Alonso, and I understand that this core underperformed and they had to kind of change things up on some level. I get that, but I do think that they're, in some ways, I'll just flat out miss watching him play and anchor this lineup. And now David Stearns has to be a really busy man because the Mets have a ton of holes in that lineup, as well as the bullpen, as well as the, who's a 1 or 2 starter. And I just think losing Pete Alonso, I'll just say, the word for me personally is sad.
Thanks, Lori. We'll go next to Matt, and I want to preface this because I don't know how many of you watched the Devin Williams press conference. It might have been the shortest press conference in the history of the New York Mets, right? It was like 15 minutes long. And I think look, this is me, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Really? I think that when they scheduled it right before the winter meetings, I think they kind of knew, and you guys can ask, the SNY folks when they're on the panel later. I think they kind of knew that none of the, regular beat writers would be on the call because they were all taking some time off before the winter meetings, which is an absolute grind. It's like 4 days of hell. So that was the reason. So when I got to ask my question of Devin Williams, Matt, I had no idea that, I believed what we were told, that he was going to be the first piece of the back end of the bullpen. And I got to be honest, I really felt that the whole Nimmo trade was made because of that flexibility down the road, and at least Edwin, if not Edwin and Pete, would be returned. So when he signs with the Dodgers, what goes through your mind, Edwin Diaz?
Obviously, like a lot of Mets fans, when you got that notification that Edwin signs a 3-year deal with the Dodgers, no money was attached at the time. So you're confused, you're upset because you thought the whole idea was to partner Devin Williams, Edwin Diaz in the back end, run prevention, doing everything you can to right the wrongs of the 2025 season. I see the signing happen, and I'm like, it's got to be a crazy deal, because if it's only a 3-year deal, like, the money's got to be insane. And then when it comes out, it's only $69 million. My reaction is something's amiss. Something went wrong here. I don't know what's going on, but I'm very curious to watch the story unfold. And then we get it where, Edwin ends up getting $66 million from the Mets, which, again, I know we're upset as fans, but when that deal is made, he was offered by the Mets first $22 million a year, which is the highest AAV for a reliever. They bring that to the Dodgers. They up it by a little bit. He doesn't come back to the Mets and opts to go off to LA. Now, when you couple all of this in also with Devin Williams, like I had said for weeks on our show, that I thought it would be unfair to Devin Williams to be the person who comes in here and replaces Edwin Diaz. The reason I said that was because, yes, replacing a player of that caliber can be difficult, but I also, as everyone on this panel knows, and everyone out here knows, this fan base can be a little bit unforgiving at times.
Really?
And if I'm wrong about you, I apologize. I also think that there are a lot of people that are rooting for Devin Williams to fail just because they want to be able to say, I told you so, Edwin Diaz is better, David Stearns is wrong. So in general, it's a spot for Devin. I'm upset for him because he's going to have to work through that. Tail end of his Yankee stay, he got a lot better. This is going to be a different monster because obviously the New Jersey weighs heavy in comparison to others, and we've seen it throughout the years. But in terms of Edwin himself, to bring it all back home, I was upset to see him leave. I thought Lauren put it best by saying I was annoyed because I thought it made too much sense to bring him back. And I think it could have been figured out. But at the same time, we have to realize he had an opportunity to bring it back to the Mets, who had more money to play with. They offered something. It was the highest AAV. He took it. He went to LA, or LA comes in. They offer more. He doesn't come back to the Mets. That in itself does tell a story to me, whether it's A, he wanted to leave, or B, there is something bubbling beneath the surface that he didn't want to be a part of anymore.
Okay, before I ask this next question to the great Anthony Rivera, I just have to take a moment, so talk amongst yourselves. So Anthony, Brandon Nimmo, number 9, who I believe was the heart and soul of the New York Mets, gets traded, and I seem to be the only one who's upset about it. So you folks remember in 2018 when Brandon Nimmo came to the QBC for the first time, and he was a young kid, and we all fell in love with him, right? Because I know I did. And I remember talking to Keith Blacknick, media goon, who is one of the founders of this festival, does a fantastic job, who gave me this jersey today because he knows I feel bad. But we all fell in love with Brandon Nimmo, and I told Keith after that, I said, man, that was great. I said, I love that guy. He's my favorite Met now. And then when Brandon Nimmo gets traded, a lot of people seem to be okay with it, and I wasn't. So why don't you tell us why you think the Brandon Nimmo trade makes sense, and then I'll follow up with something else.
Well, first off, I'm a huge Brandon Nimmo fan, so let's start off with that. But I am kind of relieved that they were able to trade him, not because of who he is and what he provides on the field, because that contract is not going to look good in the next 2 to 3 years. If you watched him play on the field this year, you can tell that he needs to be a DH, probably within the next season or 2. He does not have any range in left field anymore. He can't throw, and that's not someone that you want in the outfield when you are talking about run prevention and being able to play defense. You can't have Tyrone Taylor in the middle of those two, because that's who the center fielder is right now, having to take care of Brandon Nimmo in left field, and we all know Juan Soto is not a great right fielder. So now you're having him do double work in center field. So I was a little bit relieved that they were able to trade this contract. Even when the talk started about breaking up this core in September, I said if they can find a way to get out of that Brandon Nimmo contract, they need to do it, because otherwise he has to be the DH on this team. And this was all before we weren't signing Pete Alonso. So now it feels like a whole lot worse, because one of those two guys is going to be the DH of this team if they were both here. And I prefer it to be Pete Alonso, but now we have neither, so we're rocking a hard spot.
Here's the other thing too. I think again, I'm not the stat rat that a lot of people are, but as far as runners in scoring position, which we all complained about all year last year, right? We all complained about runners in scoring position. The 2 best hitters with runners in scoring position last year from the Mets were Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo.
Nimmo batted over 300 with runners in scoring position.
So I guess my point is that you're right. Now that Pete's gone and Brandon's gone, that's 2 impact bats that the Mets are going to have. That the Mets are going to have to. That the Mets are going to have to replace that. Yeah. So I think that when we're looking at the rest of the when we're looking at oh my goodness. when we're looking at the rest of what's in front of us, I used to be an actor, so I know how to project. We didn't have microphones off Broadway.
Put it right here.
So, so I guess the next question I want to ask is I want to ask the people out there, how are you feeling? If you have a question for somebody on the dais, just, ask who you want to ask. Thank you. Ask them, because really this is about you guys. This is about, the fans out there that are hurting. Because I know you are, because I'm a fan too. I may be in the media, but I don't lie about my fandom. And I took a lot of heat for asking, all right, Jeff, you have a question?
And then another one over there.
Come up to the day, come up to the microphone.
No, yeah.
Okay. This is a question for Anthony. What about the pitching options, and what do you think about Pablo Lopez? Because I like Pablo Lopez.
I know, Jeff, you're a huge Pablo Lopez guy. I honestly don't know. I don't know. We don't know David Stearns' direction. I think that's the biggest problem. We don't know where he's going with this. He doesn't want to give out big contracts to pitchers over 30. We don't know if he wants to even trade the prospects. So, Pablo Lopez maybe could work, right? I was talking about Joe Ryan, but who are we going to give up for them? Do we want to give up the big prospects for them? Or are we going to save it for someone else, like a Skubal, or who else is it? Peralta out in Milwaukee. I think he wants to bring all his Milwaukee guys in. That's me personally thinking. I wouldn't be shocked if he goes after McGill, Peralta, and don't be shocked if Rhys Hoskins is playing first base for this New York Mets team. I don't want it, but David Stearns likes all his guys. So.
Hey, good morning. Looking at the end of the season last year, did you guys think that what was wrong with the Mets was really fixable in one off season, such that they go into 2026 with a legitimate chance to win the NL East or even?
We have a move. You want to take that? We have a signing. So we have a signing here. Apparently, Will Salmon is reporting that the Mets are in agreement on a deal with Jorge Polanco.
Let's go!
So, breaking news right here on Stand Mets.
Another infielder, great. Lori, why don't you take that about the confidence, about the core, about the end of the season? Why don't you take that one?
Well, the question was, which is a good one, is not necessarily about the core. The question is, could what ails the Mets be fixed in one off season? And then the other interesting part of your question is, how do you factor in, if at all, that 2027 we may be looking at a strike or a lockout? There's a new collective bargaining agreement that has to be negotiated, and I'm going to be very surprised if they're able to negotiate that without us missing some baseball in 2027. So, I think that what the Mets are trying to do when you say fix what ails, fix the core, fix in one off season, I think the Mets have been trying to get younger. Sorry, over here, if you could be a little quieter. Just a little quieter, thanks. I think the Mets have been trying to get younger, improve the farm system, and when you look at it, let's be fair, we'll take a step back. David Stearns, top 5 farm system right now. Mets have done that. That's important, and I think we're seeing, look, everybody loves Nolan McLean. Everybody's really excited about Carson Binge and what he can be, and as much as you love Nimmo, Carson Binge, maybe you're a new guy, and it's going to be really exciting. So those players need an opportunity, and I think that is David Stearns' vision for this team. But you have the richest owner in baseball. You have deep pockets. You have a payroll over $300 million. You're in New York City. It is not an unfair expectation that even though you are transforming this team, which clearly they decided this team was not going to win a World Series together, the expectation should be, and I believe, is that you need to be able to go compete for a wild card and get to the postseason every year. That's the expectation they're setting. So do I think it's impossible in one off season to do transformation and still compete for a playoff spot? No, I think you can do that in one off season. I don't know that you can be a World Series threat in one off season, especially when we see the superpower that the Dodgers are creating. And we'll see what happens with the Blue Jays, but they seem to be capitalizing on their moment in time really nicely and adding to it. And I think for all the people, all of us who are upset about the Mets losing Pete Alonso or making the Nimmo trade for all the reasons that Anthony just said, all you have to do is look at that World Series and see Blue Jays, Dodgers, and the quality of baseball on the field and the defense and realize that the Mets were not in that stratosphere. And that's what I think David Stearns, if we're going to cut him a little slack, is looking at that and saying, how do I make the Mets a team like that? And so to the pitching question before, I'll say, for my expectation, trade for Skubal. You want improve the pitching? Use your bullets. Use the trade chips. Don't trade for somebody. Trade for. My question is, who's starting game 1 or 2 if you get to a postseason game? McClain, fine. Who else? Who's starting that? Trade for that guy. You're using prospects. You have a ton. Trade for that guy right now. And so trade for Skubal, sign Michael King, then I can have some faith in the pitching staff.
Steve Cohen is a big boss. The buck stops with him. He's also going to build a casino. You feel he's holding back money from the Mets to build a casino?
No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. I'm also the editor, in addition to running Gotham Baseball, I also am the editor-in-chief of the Wave newspaper in Rockaway. So we have a really good relationship with the Queens Chamber of Commerce, which was a big proponent of Steve Cohen spending money in Queens. Way before the casino was even being discussed. The two have nothing to do with each other, except, and it's great because I did some spaces this week with some union guys that are actually working on the casino project. And they said that the only connection is that the Mets need to be good so that Citi Field is full, so that after games, they'll go to the casino. So I think we all have Wilpon stars and we think that, that money's going there and that money's going there. Steve Cohen wants the Mets to be great so that the casino's great. So they're not connected.
The casino's only going to make him more money.
Right, exactly.
He can walk and chew gum at the same time.
But the Mets lost $350 million.
Doesn't matter. With the way the stock market works, he made more money than he lost. He's richer now. He is much richer now than the day he bought the Mets. Much. So I know it sounds weird, but the amount of money he lost on the Mets last year is a rounding error for him.
Doesn't that happen with all the teams though? Don't they lose all that money? All the teams are losing.
Well, different teams. Let's talk about the Yankees for a second. So and this will be a positive. Or, okay, fill in the blank. Let's talk about other teams with rich owners. The calculus here is that the value of these teams goes up so massively that if you buy them and now they're worth billions and billions, so you lose money every year. You might lose a little money every year, or you make a little money, or you break even every year. But if you ever wanted to sell, your family's wealth is billions. So losing a few million when the thing is worth billions to you is really it's the wrong calculus. Now, with that said, again, I know you don't want me to use the Y word, but if you're the Yankees and your family business and your main source of income is just the Yankees and the S Network, the ROI on that matters to them because they have to pay things with things. They don't have the same level of deep pockets. They're paying stuff. And that's not a sob song. They should still be paying a ton of money also. And the Yankee fans have a right to be annoyed there with their budgets. But for the Mets and Stephen Alex Cohen and their deep pockets, Mets fans, I'll say this. For anybody who's sort of saying shades of the Wilpon era, come on. You know better. Y'all know better. You know, as bad as it is right now, and this is a bad week for Mets baseball, it was a depressing week for Mets baseball. We are still living in what I believe over the next decade, this will be the golden age of ownership for Mets baseball, and it's not even close. And we're a little spoiled as Mets fans that, you have this owner, and yes, he hired the guy that is the Harvard smart guy, and he's making some unemotional calculations that are bumming us out.
And the Wilpons wouldn't be paying any luxury tax right now, so Cohen is paying tons of money in luxury tax. Mark, do you want the terms of this deal?
I'm sorry?
Do you want the terms?
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, what's the terms?
2 years, $40 million to play first base and DH.
I can't
He's set to
even,
play first base.
yeah,
First base and DH.
Jorge Polanco, ladies and gentlemen. All right, next question.
I think the last thing we have to worry about is the casino losing money.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
It'll be all right. It would have been all right with the 62 Mets.
Yeah.
Now, Anthony, what's up, Mark? How you guys doing? I think people are getting too emotional. I know, Mark, I know you're a big Nimmo guy. I think Nimmo was way overrated by Mets fans. Listen, he was all
I
right.
thought that guy's Michael.
Anywhere outside of New York, nobody's scared of Nimmo. To me, I think he was overrated. He's all right, man. But anyway, with Alonso and stuff, listen, if they win, nobody's going to like this team either way. Until they're first place, a couple months into the season, nobody's gonna like this team, regardless. Stearns we trust, first of all. But Stearns is, he's dry, he's boring, there's no personality. And then with Alonso and everything, listen, everybody hurts now. We like Alonso, we love Alonso. But if they win, he's not gonna be looking around the parade going, oh, it'd be so much better if Alonso was here, right? It's just not gonna be like that. As far as Nimmo, I think we gotta give this guy a chance. Let him build his team.
Is there a question in there somewhere?
No, I don't think so. Statement. More of a statement. Right, your thoughts.
Go ahead, man.
There's one thing I'm with you, where I think a lot of Mets fans could have pumped up Brandon Nimmo a little bit too much. I can get that. But look, like Mark said, like Ann said, I too am a Nimmo fan. I supported the guy the entire time this year. It's sad to see him go, but I understood why he went. And to what you were saying before about Alonso, and to Lori's point before as well, when it comes to what I believe, and look, like the shirt he's wearing, Stearns we trust. I have said on our show multiple times that I'm going to allow this process to play out. Am I a little bit questioning right now when you tell me that Jorge Polanco is going to be playing first base? I do have questions on that. But I think, and I may be wrong, but when it comes to what happened last offseason, I prefaced this to Mets fans when it was happening, that Pete Alonso comes back to this team. If it was to happen, which it did for the one season, I said, odds are, you better take it all in because this is it. We're not doing this entire back and forth again with him and Boris. Enjoy the season. He's going to end up leaving. So I came into this offseason believing that he was not going to be coming back. And he did not. Because I looked back to last offseason when you signed Mark Healey for $765 million. And when eventually he opts out and they let him come back in for $805 million, the whole plan here is to build around that piece. It was always going to be about Juan Soto moving forward. So I believe that Stearns looks at this and says, I have a 27-year-old next coming, or what many believe could be a Ted Williams type of run of a player, Hall of Fame type, okay? That being said, he says, okay, I need to surround this player with the right people. If he believes, which clearly he does, that the likes of Nimmo over the next 5 years, Alonso over the next 5 years are going to be trending down, whereas Soto is trending up, if you're going to surround him with players that are trending down, well, then not only are you wasting money on what you invested in on the Alonso and Nimmo types, now you're wasting money on the prime of Juan Soto. So that's the way I look at it, and I know people don't want to hear it because they love these players, they become attached to these players, and I sympathize with you when it comes to that. But that's the way that's the calculus that I think they're looking at, because as much money as the guy has, and all these owners have a ton of money, they still want to make sure that they're investing in the right pieces. Yes, you can blow money and it's no big deal. We make a big deal about Frankie Montas. It was a 2-year deal. The money's that doesn't matter. But when you lock into longer term deals, then it becomes annoying. Then you have to try and trade a 1-for-1 like we just did with Brandon Nimmo. So that's kind of where I am in trying to calm people down when it comes to what the potential outlook for this team might be.
I spent, obviously 2024 was a magical run, 2 games away from the World Series, right? So coming into 2025, I defended every move David Stearns made, even Frankie Montas. I was like, you know what, David Stearns knows what he's doing, gonna trust him. But let's be honest, folks, the pitching staff was a disgrace. Waited too long to bring up Nolan McLean and Sproat. Obviously rushed Jonathan, he wasn't ready. And the cacophony of these AAA relievers back and forth. Oh, what a shock it didn't work. So when we talk about in David Stearns we trust, I'm a pro David Stearns guy, but the circle of trust has been broken for me. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean I want him fired. That doesn't mean I think he's a bad GM. But he's got to show me that he knows what he's doing, because I'll be honest with you, Enrico Palazzo playing first base doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't. I mean, you did not upgrade the position. And I know the Moneyball people are going to be like, well, you're not really doing that. You're replacing wins. And look, you know what? At the end of the day, all I care about results, not process. You can talk about process till you're blue in the face, but if you don't win, that is your job. Your job is to win. This is not high school sports. Oh, you tried. No, this is professional sports. Your job is to win. And it's New York. Thanks, Jack. Everybody say hi to Jack. That's what I'm saying. And I just want to say one thing before we get to the next question, if somebody else has a question. My dad, Ron, who looks just like Terry Collins, wasn't able to make it this year. He's doing okay, it was just too much for him. But he wanted to let everybody know how much he misses coming. And
Going back to the deadline 2 years ago, he hasn't made a big move. I'm literally just going to say that. Who has he got? Why should we have plus?
well, let me say this about the deadline. Let me say this about the deadline trade. Also respond. I signed off on every deadline he made, except for Cedric Mullins. Jack liked Cedric Mullins. I wanted Harrison Bader. I felt Harrison Bader knew what it was like to play here. Had some juice, was a fun guy to watch. And look what he did with the Phillies. So obviously the Cedric Mullins deal didn't work out, and I wasn't crazy about that. But I think a lot of Met fans signed off on getting Helsley and getting Soto. And thought that Taylor Rogers was going to be, solid, Chad Bradford 2.0. So, I am definitely someone that, the results matter, of course, but, that's part of the circle of trust. I didn't build a pitching staff. You didn't build a pitching staff. Lori didn't build a pitching staff. David Stearns did. It was one of the worst pitching staffs, one of the worst pitching roster decisions in the history of baseball. Results matter.
I think I would also look at, you're asking about the deadline the last 2 years and saying, why should we trust Stearns? Go back to 2024, and before this season, I think the way he was building the 2024 pitching staff, a lot of us had question marks about it. We're like, wow, seems like there's some, I don't know, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, does this make sense? And you know what? All his gambles, all his bets in 2024 with that pitching staff, almost all of them worked. And, having Iglesias around to be able to bring him up and signing those guys like that. All the bets he made in 2024 worked. And they worked both in terms of production and this elusive chemistry piece that made the OMG Mets magical and a really fun ride. And I think that as bad as 2025 was, in some ways, it's probably better that they win a game or two more and they make the postseason, and David Stearns doesn't have to learn the lessons from this past year. And so now in terms of the pitching staff, it can't all be a bunch of ifs and question marks and thinking we're going to roll the dice and this is all going to work out. I think he is understanding that somewhere there has to be an ace-like anchor at the top of that staff, and then you can have a lot of these young pups and do that. I think that was probably a lesson learned. And even for David Stearns, I think that seeing the clubhouse and some of the rumors we've heard and things we've heard and seen from that team versus 2024, I think maybe he even did see a little bit of that chemistry piece. And he is breaking up the core and it's painful, but I also think that there was something off with that team last year that made them underperform their talent. And so I hope he learned the lessons from that.
There's a lot of rumors about breaking up the core a little further and more positive football, like increasing ownership, the starting shortstop. I hope this is just a complete rebuild because look, he was reluctant to trade a bunch of prospects last offseason. You go all in on Soto, you're not going to trade for legitimate pitching staff.
We've probably all seen, everybody's probably seen the Padres rumor that was thrown out from a Padres podcast and show where they're talking about Xander Bogaerts and Miller for Lindor. I mean, look, I'd be surprised just because for that one, you mentioned I'm with Anthony on the Nimmo contract. I think if they had waited another year or so, that's untradeable. I think Xander Bogaerts' contract was a little bit like shocking when they signed it. So I'd be surprised if they took that one back, although he is rumored, and from Boston, known to be like phenomenal as a leader and in the clubhouse, but I don't think they would take that contract.
Is Master Flip here in the audience? I'm sorry,
There he is.
Gracie.
There he is right there.
The Lindor rumor is his fault. It's all his fault.
That right there.
That whole Lindor rumor, and I don't say it like in a mean way, I mean, because he was trying to speak into existence Tatis Jr. coming to the Mets. And he kept doing it every day, bring Tatis Jr. to the Mets. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so the Padres people and that fan base are lunatics. That fan base was somebody from that, right, Master Flip? There was somebody from San Diego that had like MLB in their user handle. And she put it out that it was like a legit rumor. And that's how it took on, it's all his fault. Steve Phillips was talking about it on MLB Network the other day.
Yeah, I don't see the Mets taking on Xander Bogaerts' contract.
Yeah, Lindor is not going anywhere. Another question? Yes.
Do you think that Stearns might, for the right pitcher, be willing to go beyond 3 years to get a start? Knowing that they might be bad at the contract, but the cost of doing business, they can give them 5, 6, 7 years to get that right pitcher in.
I would say yes. If the pitcher is around 25 to 27 years old, he was going to offer.
Look at Yamamoto. Yeah.
Yamamoto was 25, and he offered $325 million for, was it 10, 12 years? So if it's young, he will. If they're 30 or over, he's not going to offer them any.
And with all the Scoopable thing, if the Mets were to trade Tom and the other and Sproles for him, they Orski might sign the extension because it's Orski.
He never has.
And they put the man 7 years, and the Dodgers are the we want to give and keep him. The Mets would have to offer up 7 years.
I think the Mets would be willing to offer more than 3 years for a contract for a starting pitcher because Eduardo Perez told everybody that he wouldn't. And Eduardo Perez hates the Mets because they didn't hire him to be the manager. So, if you ever watch ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, thank God we don't have to anymore. Eduardo Perez would always, be killing the Mets the whole time. People forget he was in the mix for manager and he didn't get hired. So, but in all seriousness, I think for the right guy, he would, and I think it's unfair for anyone in the media to couch it that way, to say that David Stearns doesn't have the will to make the right deal for the right guy. He's not going to overpay, nor should he.
If Stearns trades Sprout and for Skubal, would he, knowing he can't do it now, will not do it now, will have to be next offseason, because that's how Boris operates. Would he give him a 7-year contract to keep him, knowing they just invested all that trading for him?
If they're trading top prospects to get him, then yes, they have factored in that they would do a 7-year deal.
And that's the picture that you would do.
But it's still a competition, because the Dodgers are coming with a better offer, and it goes to the Dodgers for 8 years, and
That's, it's called gambling for a reason, and in baseball, a lot of times it's a gamble. You're putting a lot of money on the table for, look, we've seen it a million times. We've seen it a million times. Mike Piazza is one of the few guys that, signs a big year and is good for the majority of them. So, do you have any other questions from anyone? Here we go.
And the panel talked about how we may rebuild the bullpen from here with guys coming off the board every day. Rogers came off the board yesterday. We were going to bring Helsley back, but that ilk, the top guys seem to be gone, and our bullpen is decimated at this point. There is no one coming back.
I know that we're up against the clock right now, so I'll try to answer as quickly as I can. I always say, and a lot of people probably hear this too, when it comes to bullpens, they're very fickle. It's year to year. A lot of times, you bring in people, and you have no idea who they are, they become stars. No example, nobody knew who Aaron Luke was. He comes in here, he has a fantastic season, and then he goes off to the Angels, and you haven't heard from him since. So, no matter what, they're going to bring in names, whether you know them or not. Again, Mark doesn't want to hear the word process, but there's always going to be ups and downs with bullpens because it's always different year to year. So I think that there are some interesting names still out there. Peter Fairbanks is one just to throw out there as an example, but there's no name that we as fans probably know. But again, it's their job to find these pitchers that obviously go out there and perform, especially in the New York market.
Well, folks, that's State of the Mets for this year. Really, really appreciate everyone being here and asking the questions. I really appreciate Matt, Lori, and Anthony for being part of our State of the Mets. And, look, you can reach out to us all on Twitter. If you look at my account, which is safe now, Mark C. Healey, you'll have everybody's tagged in there. And the QBC, and that's the Mets.